The Oracl Network. Look deeper.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked. I've been shot. 1692 means we got shots fired. 4:15 ASF. Route 291 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
We are interrupting this broadcast with breaking news. We have just learned of another mass shooting, this time in the neighboring cities of Midland and Odessa, Texas, in multiple locations. Authorities have confirmed 5 people are dead and 21 others hurt. At least one officer is among the injured. Witnesses are posting videos like these on social media. In one of those images, you can see a pickup truck with multiple bullet holes on the side of the road. Police in Midland say at one point, a suspect hijacked a U.S. mail truck. Local police have confirmed the shooter was shot and killed, and it is no longer an active shooter situation. The ATF and the FBI are also responding.
When you are driving or traveling in a car going somewhere, whether it be to your job, to the shopping mall, or any other place, the last thing you are usually worried about is being shot by a deranged gunman driving around, sticking his rifle out of the window of his car, and firing. On August 31st, 2019, that is exactly what happened to 7 individuals who were doing nothing wrong and were just trying to get from one place to another, and another 25 victims who would be injured. 3 of the 25 victims that were injured were police officers.
Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge in not naming the shooter by their actual name.
In today's episode, we will refer to the shooter as Chad.
You'll notice that I'm not naming this subject, and there's a reason for that. I refuse to. I'm not going to give him any notoriety for what he did. We'll provide that information to you, but not in this public stage.
In the late morning or early afternoon on August 31st, 2019, Chad was called into the main office building of his employer, Journey Oilfield Services. His manager explained that he was being let go due to the manager receiving multiple complaints from other employees about Chad's odd behavior, particularly for speaking rudely to fellow employees. The manager asked for Chad's keys to the property, as well as a receiver that opens the front gate. Chad immediately became irate and started making bizarre statements. He claimed that other employees were involved in child pornography, and went on to discuss different conspiracy theories about the oilfield company tracking him. Chad stormed off. He got into his late 90s gold Toyota Camry and attempted to drive off. Since he failed to give his keys and the receiver back to the employer, the manager flipped the breaker, thereby turning the power off to the front gate. This stopped the electric gate from opening. It didn't stop Chad. All of a sudden, he revved his engine and floored the gas pedal, slamming into and crashing through the gate, setting himself free from the property. Watching Chad drive through the fence, the manager called 911 to report that a former employee had just been fired and damaged their property.
So Saturday morning, our suspect went to work at Journey Oilfield Service. He was there for a short time and was terminated by his employer. Right after that firing, he called 911, Odessa Police Department's 911, and so did his employer. And basically they were complaining on each other because they had a disagreement over the fire.
At 1:29 p.m., Odessa Police Department Officer Taylor Box responded to Journey Oilfield Services. The manager was worried that Chad was on his way to a job site, so additional officers responded to that job site just in case Chad showed up. During this time, other officers responded to the Journey Oilfield Services office building to aid the officer with interviewing employees who witnessed Chad's fit of rage. While officers were speaking with employees, Chad called 911 and asked to be transferred to the officers that were at the office building. While officers were speaking with employees, Chad called 911 and asked to be transferred to the officers that were at the office building. When Officer Box answered the phone, Chad went on another tirade, complaining that he had been held against his will at the office building, and the only way for him to escape was to crash through the fence. He also said that there was a cult planning his murder.
Sure, he called the national tip line about 15 minutes before his encounter with the troopers. It was, frankly, rambling statements about some of the atrocities that he felt that he had gone through. He did not make a threat during that phone call. He ended that phone call. After the phone call, we initiated all of our law enforcement procedures, trying to figure out who he was, where he was.
After Officer Box got off the phone with Chad, he went back to his work of interviewing witnesses at the office building. Not long after he hung up, the officers heard radio traffic coming through their police radios of reports of a reckless driver who had a long rifle. Officer Box felt a chill go through his entire body when he heard the description of the car that was driving so carelessly. The description matched the vehicle that Chad was driving when he crashed into the fence at the Journey Oilfield Services office building. Meanwhile, at 3:13 p.m., Department of Public Safety Trooper Chuck Pryor saw a late 1990s Toyota Camry fail to signal a lane change. Trooper Pryor activated his patrol lights and attempted to pull the driver over for the driving violation. The Camry didn't pull over, however. Rather, he continued driving while gradually gaining speed.
The Texas Department of Public Safety made an initial traffic stop at about 3:15 on I-20 yesterday afternoon, and their trooper was shot during that traffic stop. Our subject then proceeded into the city of Odessa, and over a period of time created several more victims.
All of a sudden, Trooper Pryor saw the driver, Chad, raise his rifle out toward the rear window and open fire. Trooper Pryor immediately called shots fired over the police radio and asked for officers to respond as backup. He couldn't physically or safely continue chasing after Chad, so he pulled over and waited for backup to arrive. As he did so, he watched Chad speed off, not once touching the brakes or slowing down.
Pop, 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 but it was loud, and you could feel the percussion. Is that what it's called? And I said to Dan, I'm like, did that car just backfire? And he was like confused because it didn't really sound like a car backfiring. And oh God. I looked over my shoulder to left, and the gold car pulled up, and the man was there, and he had a very large gun and it was pointing at me.
Chad approached the intersection of 338 and 191 just as Maria Bordeaux was leaving the Academy Sports Store. She had her toddler safely buckled in the back seat of her vehicle and was talking to her husband on the phone. Seemingly, out of nowhere, Maria's husband heard her scream into the phone. A scream which no one wants to hear while speaking to a loved one. After the scream, the phone line went dead. Maria's husband immediately called back in an attempt to reconnect with her. Finally, someone answered the phone. But the voice on the other end of the line was not Maria, but rather a stranger that her husband did not know. The stranger told him that there was a shooting, and Maria, as well as their toddler, were being taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, Maria did not survive her wounds, but thankfully their toddler wasn't harmed. On East 42nd Street, just over a mile down the street from the Academy Sports Store, 15-year-old Lila Hernandez was with her mom, brother, and stepfather at the Freedom Buick GMC. The family was waiting for a set of keys so they could take a truck for a test drive. While waiting, Lila was shot in the neck. Out of instinct, her 18-year-old brother Nathan jumped on top of Lila in an effort to shield her from any more bullets that may come her way. Nathan was injured, protecting his sister. Lila's stepfather removed his shirt and applied pressure to her wound, attempting to save her life. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and when paramedics arrived, she was pronounced dead. Chad continued driving down 42nd Street, driving in and out of different parking lots, randomly firing his weapon. Bullet casings were found in the Olive Garden, Market Street, and Twin Peaks parking lots. At 3:34 p.m., Chad continued driving, and this time, he drove through various subdivisions, such as Tanglewood Lane, Maple Avenue, and East Everglade Avenue. Just 1 minute later, at 3:35 p.m., a traffic light surveillance camera showed Chad stopped at a red light on the corner of 38th Street and North Dixie Boulevard. After stopping, he put his vehicle in park and got out. He started shooting at cars that were stopped, both in front and behind him. Chad also had a small tan-colored dog that jumped out of the vehicle, running off at the same time. Chad then got back into his car and continued his rampage. At 38th Street and Walnut Avenue, Edwin Peregrino was at his parents' house with his brother-in-law. The two men heard gunshots and went outside to see where they were coming from. Edwin was shot just outside of the home and was killed instantly. His brother-in-law was injured badly, but he lived. Two other men were killed during the attack. Cameron Brown was found dead in his company's truck at the intersection of Grandview Avenue and Yukon Road. He died from a single gunshot wound to the head.
Oh, straight up. King just got shot. So lucky to be alive right now.
Joe Griffith was at the Stripes convenience store located at Faudree Road with his wife and two children. The family was on their way to have family photos taken when Joe was shot and killed. The rest of his family remained unharmed. Rodolfo Acro, or Rudy to his friends and family, was driving one of his company trucks when Chad fired 3 bullets at him. 2 bullets passed through the cab of the truck, and the third bullet went through the window, killing Rudy instantly. Between 3:35 p.m. and 3:38 p.m., Chad spotted United States Postal Service worker Mary Granados in her work van on Adams Avenue. He pulled Mary out of her van, shot her in the head and the side, and left her lifeless body on the side of the road, jumping into her van and driving away. At 4:00 p.m., Midland Police Department officer Zach Owens saw a suspicious-looking United States Postal Office van in a parking lot behind the Synergy Cinema. Officer Owens closed in on the van, intending to ask what was going on, when all of a sudden, the van turned around and headed back towards the theater. Thankfully, the theater was evacuated when the news was received that there was a deranged gunman loose on the roads.
She says, "Dad, we just evacuated the building. There's an active shooter." Next thing I know on the phone, I hear, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. Here he comes. He's driving down. He's in a mail truck." I was watching you hear pop, 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 pop. And